rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right. Welcome back, Rebel Force Radio, your source for the Force, and so much more. I just got something in the mail. You know, every day it seems like I get packages, and it's all about this collecting business and the way collecting is done now, where you buy things, and I'm not making this up, you buy things a year, sometimes a year and a half out, and then boxes just pile up on your porch, and you open it up, and it's like you don't remember. You don't even have a chance to get excited about things because you order them, and it's going to be 6 months, a year and a half before you get it. So you have no idea what you're getting. And I opened up this box, and this is what I got: this Galaxy of Heroes Vintage Collection 2-pack. Galaxies, I don't have no memory of ordering this. I didn't even know this was coming out. Obviously, I did because I ordered it. But it's a Darth Revan and HK-47 2-pack on vintage cards. So you can see, if you're watching the all-access video, you can get on Patreon at rebelforceradio.com. You'll see this. And so I bought it. I don't know. I know this is Jedi Knight Revan. It's not even Darth Revan. Who the hell is Jedi Knight Revan? I guess it's just from Galaxy of Heroes. I don't know. It's a problem because here's the issue. You get these pre-orders. They show up. You know you've got 10 minutes to make a decision. So you go, well, I don't know. I might want this at some point, so I might as well buy it. So it's not like where you could stand there at the store and you look at the character. You kind of, I don't know. I don't know what I feel about this. I think I'll pass, and I'll find him later maybe on a clearance shelf. No, now it's beat the clock, and you end up with Jedi Revan and HK-47 from Galaxy of Heroes on a vintage card. Oh, the woes of modern collecting here. So maybe you can relate. I know someone who can relate, and that is, of course, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Yeah, there's a lot of pressures when it comes to being a Star Wars collector. Let me tell you, man. I'll tell you what. We're gonna have a meeting here, a support group meeting about Star Wars action figures. I didn't know that was out. I didn't know that was a
shipping,
thing.
Apparently.
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't pre-order it myself. I got away from all of that crap. I wait for stuff to go on clearance. They try to tease you with this manufactured rarity of these things. But when they get released, you can pretty much snag anything you want.
I think it depends on where you live.
Well, no, I do all my ordering online.
Well, what do you mean? Like, because so many times I get shut out of stuff. And maybe that was years ago. Maybe it's not the case anymore. And that's why I'm so anxious about getting these stupid pre-orders in. But you're saying that you pretty much find what you want eventually?
All the time. And if you wait long enough, it's at a discounted price, which I think is nice.
I need to change strategies.
Yeah, it's a strategy. I figure I have like 4,000 of these things hogging up my basement. Like, do I really still need to be the first kid on the block? I don't think so. I'd rather save a few bucks.
You got nothing to prove.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Now, this vintage collection Jedi Knight Revan and HK-47, those are hot releases. They just came out. They were targeting February 2024, so you're getting it right on time.
Yeah.
And it is Jedi Revan. Now, if you want the Darth Revan figure, that will be coming out later this year, single-carded.
Oh.
As a KOTOR
I probably
figure.
pre-ordered it a year ago.
You probably did. Now, this particular 2-pack you're showing us can be found online for, the list price, $39.99 for the 2-pack. And you get the Jedi Knight Revan in HK-47. Entertainment Earth is still offering it for pre-order. That was just the first one I found. I'm not endorsing Entertainment Earth, but whatever. They've been around for a long time.
They've been around. I'm not afraid to admit that they probably get 90% of my business. I got burned from the Dork Side guys. They went out of business. Luckily, luckily, I had pre-ordered everything on credit card, which gave me a level of protection, but I knew people who had PayPal'd. And with PayPal, they take the funds out right away. With a credit card, they don't. And so I know a lot of people that got stuck holding the bag with that. That's when I made the switch to EE because they've been around forever. And I just trust them because they're huge. So I don't think they're going to be running away anytime soon with people's money. But so I got burned on that.
Yeah. And you like to keep your cards mint, the figures intact on the card, mint on card. Yeah. I don't care. So I can go to your Walmarts or your Amazons, and they send them to me. Like, I'll order 6 figures at a time. They'll send 6 individual boxes to my house. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. This must be a quality control thing. No, each figure inside the box comes with a damaged card. So
you say it like that's an accessory, complete with damaged card.
Yeah, with damaged card. But I mean, that also, when the card shows up and it's all bent up and beat up and stuff, it makes it just so guilt-free to rip that bubble off the card and liberate that action figure, which is what I do. Every once in a while, I'll get a card that's so mint and pristine and unpunched and just, 10 out of 10. And I let myself go on a little guilt trip sometimes before actually removing the figure from the card. Sometimes I'll keep it around unopened for a long period of time. But you can count on it sooner or later. That sucker is coming off that card, and that bubble is going to get recycled, and the figure will be liberated. That's what I'm all about. Kyle Newman said, watching me open action figures is like watching an otter lay on his back opening up shellfish.
There's no mercy. Mac's not getting the X-Acto blade out to cut that bubble off. No. No.
Surgically removing the bubble.
You know how like the graphic starts peeling off the cardboard and it's coming off in strips? That's what it looks like. It's a massacre.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I have just within reach some cards here. This one is a Moff Jerjerrod. So look, I did a pretty good job removing
That's
that
not too
thing
bad.
from the.
Yeah, at least his picture is. That's a great card back, by the way. That's what my buddy Michael Mercy calls unfinished business. That's when you look at that and you go, that should have been out in 1983.
There's nothing I enjoy more than ripping the bubble off the card, letting that figure loose, and then the first thing you do when you let the action figure loose, you have to take it up to your nose and that's so good, that plastic.
You got to smell that plastic.
I just sniffed Woody Harrelson, for the record. Woody Harrelson from the Solo film.
Beckett.
They gave him kind of a dad bod.
Yeah, he looks like Woody. He looks like Woody. I put my Black Series in Professor X chair, and then I got a Larry Flint action figure, which is pretty cool.
That's right. He starred in that. The People versus Larry Flint. And he was actually quite good in that movie, too.
Yeah. He sure was.
Yeah, the dad bod for Woody, though, I think Woody does a little bit better keeping himself in shape.
That looks more like Luthen, like that kind of body.
A little bit.
As opposed to Woody. I thought Woody was not quite as paunchy in Solo.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's just Hasbro condemning all middle-aged dudes in plastic.
Hey, get the middle-aged dude buck for this figure.
We got to get the kids buying the figures more, not these old guys. What can we do to repel them a little bit?
Oh, man.
Dad bod action figures? I don't know. It's like, nah, if they didn't leave after Rancor Keeper, they're sticking around for the long haul. What are we going to do?
Yeah, you can't make Slave Leia anymore, but you can have a sexy dad bod, Woody Harrelson. What gives? What are we, just slabs of meat? I don't know.
Well, that's the de-evolution of action figure collecting. But, yeah, I find that just being patient and waiting saves you money. And also it makes the purchase fresh. Like when I see those pre-orders delivering June 2024, I just say, well, I'll wait for June 2024. Why do I have to invest my money in these big box stores or Hasbro or wherever? Why do they get to hold my money for half a year and I see no interest on it? So forget about it.
That is the wisdom, folks. That is the Tao of Jimmy Mack and collecting. I think that you need to write one of those little books, like the Tao of collecting. Even Sansweet hasn't written that. So you've got a leg up. You could write like a Zen guide to collecting.
Wow. As long as I don't snap before I sit down at the typewriter, I think we'll be okay. But gone are the days where I walk through the Target or Walmarts to get to the back wall only to see empty pegs and walk out of there, the walk of shame out of there, empty-handed. It's like, well, as long as I'm here, I might as well pick up some stuff. No, I'm too depressed from no action figures. I gotta leave. I gotta put this place behind me right now. This trip was a total fail. You know what the kiss of death for me always is? If I'm going on a toy run and I grab one of those little baskets, those little shopping baskets on my way to the toy, I'll find nothing. But if I don't take one of those baskets, I'm walking around and I've got, like a pile of stuff and they're falling and I'm worried about the bubble creasing and that's page 6 from the Tao of Collecting. Don't grab those little baskets. Skipping around the store with your little baskets. My Tao is a little more straightforward, slap you upside the head Tao. It's Chicago Tao. Chicago Tao of Collecting. Get it right or I'm going to smack you with my shoe heel. Chicago Tao. Coming soon to NBC. What are we doing this week? Well, we've got some juicy Star Wars rumors. That's for one. We also have some interview highlights from Daisy Ridley. Those are very interesting. I feel like that we've been seeing a tale of two Ridleys over the last week or so. And then also more interview highlights, Natasha, Bordizzo, Sabine from Ahsoka, and if there's time, Star Wars and pop culture. Right. We'll get to those. Got a couple of those. So we thought we'd kick things off with a little voicemail. Want to do that? Let's do it. Let's do it.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. It's Marty from Georgia calling, Patreon member. Hope you guys are doing well. I was listening to a podcast just now, and they said something about Star Wars culture is more about dissection than anything else because they're trying to pull things apart to understand how it fits in. And they were kind of seeing that as a negative thing. I see that as something that makes it always evolving and interesting. But I was definitely wanting to get y'all's thoughts on just that quote in general, how it's always dissecting, because they said that if you have to dissect something, that means it's dead. So it's no more real new stuff coming out of it. But I don't know, just something about that rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't know how to express it to words. So I'd appreciate if you guys could just kind of share your thoughts on that. I hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you later. Bye.
Hey, thanks, Marty. Well, I think it's a clever use of words, but dissection isn't just about analyzing something biological that has died. It's also, there's a metaphorical meaning to the term. Examining, breaking down, and that's not just breaking down animals or things. It can be stories. It can be mythology, literature, characters, all that stuff. So there are a lot of people that are trying to throw dirt on this supposed grave of Star Wars, and I'm looking at the YouTube class mostly with this, they seem to be the ones shoveling the most. But no, I think dissecting stories and mythology is, it's first of all, it's at the very foundation of a liberal arts education. It's not about memorizing things. It is about being able to reason and do exactly that, dissect, analyze. But one of the problems is, and one of the risks that you run, I think, is that, and this has been a problem that I've had, going back to the expanded universe, when it really spiraled what I feel is out of control and became the center of the Star Wars universe for some people. And that is because I think it's far too much in the minutia. And I think that it goes against and clouds the impact of the overall mythology, the overall cultural significance of the mythology. So I think that it's best when it's told in big, sweeping, broad strokes, the way George did it, the way Filoni and Favreau have done it from time to time. But when you get, and I'm not saying that we never do that or that I never do that. We get really under the hood and in the weeds. It's what we do. We analyze. But you do run the risk of analyzing it so much that you oversimplify it, or it becomes reductionist. So I say clever use of the term, but no, it's certainly not evidence that Star Wars is dead, in my opinion.
Such a bold statement from another podcaster. Number one, I don't like commenting on what other podcasters, YouTubers, or bloggers have to say about Star Wars. I'm more concerned with the conversations we generate here on this show. But I'll humor this one time. If you're going to analyze something, if you're going to dissect something, it has to be worthy of the analysis. It has to have substance. Otherwise, you're done with your dissection the second you begin. If there's no substance, then where do you go from there? And no, something doesn't have to be dead for it to be dissected. We're not talking about frogs in your high school biology class. Okay, dissected, like you said, Jason, it's just another word for analyze. The most analyzed rock and roll band, the most dissected rock band of all time are the Beatles. And believe me, people were dissecting those Beatle albums as they were coming out, starting especially with Rubber Soul in 1966 and Sgt. Pepper's in 67. Those things people dove deep into. And that was a time when the Beatles were more than just very much alive. They ruled the universe. So that's just a really silly thing, I always thought Star Wars was very much worth getting under the hood and tinkering around with all the mechanics that make it work. Breaking down all of the story elements that appeal to universal audiences. I believe George Lucas designed Star Wars to be consumed that way because he used so many diverse influences when building the foundation for Star Wars. And not only does Star Wars lead you to dissecting the actual films, books, comics, whatever, streaming series, but it also opens up a door to all the things that influence Star Wars. And many of those things are worthy of dissection. So that sounds like a very vibrant path to discovery and something I certainly would never proclaim as dead.
Yeah, it has to be a balance. I think that the problem that I have with the way some analyze Star Wars is it becomes, like I am sitting in a biology class and they are looking at a dead frozen frog instead of talking about a very vibrant and fascinating mythology. So
how you dissect
the forest
it
for the trees.
Sometimes people dissect with a dull knife,
Yeah.
We like to keep our cutlery around here sharp and ready for slicing and dicing at any given moment. So, but yeah, I guess what you're saying, Jason, is that some people are kind of professorial about it. Others are just plain flippant and negative about it. I think it depends on how much you're in connection with yourself as a Star Wars fan. Then that is what then will open up the door to quality analysis. Are you just echoing things you read online or heard a YouTuber barf into a microphone? Or are you really thinking for yourself? Are you making decisions and forming opinions in a moment's notice? Or are you constantly looking to others for their opinions and their affirmation of your opinions?
Yeah, I think in the case of Marty, he'd heard this, he thought it was kind of interesting and wanted to know what our take was. So now you've heard it. All right. Next.
Hey guys, I was listening to your, this is Adam. I was listening to your podcast about most impactful moments in Star Wars, and I was laughing thinking of my most impactful Star Wars moments. Of course, I have many impactful moments. My father introducing me to Star Wars, watching it with him, all those things. But there's another one that I have that is very funny. The year is 1999. I would be 11 years old at that time. My mother brought my brother and I to the movie theater to see The Phantom Menace on opening day. The movie theater was so packed, and this was before you could reserve seats. It was so packed that she had to split us up. So she sat me in one area and my brother in another area, and then my mom sat in a different area. So The Phantom Menace plays, roll credits. I'm sitting next to some random old guy this entire time.
It's probably 30.
The movie gets over. I'm thinking this is the greatest thing that I had ever seen in my entire life. It was pod racing, Darth Maul's second lightsaber. I mean, Jake Lloyd was probably my age when this movie came out too. I thought this was the greatest thing on earth. And here I am, some, snot-nosed 11-year-old kid. I look up at this random guy sitting next to me, and he goes, "What the hell was that?" And I just, it took the wind right out of me. I just couldn't understand why somebody wouldn't love this movie.
What the hell was that?
So impactful and funny to me, and I'll never forget it. And I'm older now, and I understand now maybe why somebody wouldn't have loved that movie. But it was just so funny. Anyway,
don't
thanks
let
for
him.
listening, guys. Take care. Bye.
Oh, don't let the grumpy old guy change your mind after all these years. You got to keep that magic alive and try to see it through the eyes that you had when you were a kid, or at least have that window available to you. Don't let the Phantom Menace of that old guy in the theater grumbling about the movie. Maybe that guy wasn't even a Star Wars fan. How do you know? Maybe someone dragged him along. He's never seen any of the Star Wars movies, and he was confused. What was that?
Yeah.
What was that? But no, I get it, Adam. I mean, that is, I can imagine you're 11 years old. You saw this mind-blowing film, and, you look up and you see the adult in the room, and the adult just doesn't get it. But
this almost pisses me off. Because, how dare this guy pee in 11-year-old Adam's pool like that? Adam's just a kid. And you have to say something like that to him. You have to bring your George Lucas rape my childhood mentality into the movie theater to destroy it for an 11-year-old. God, I can't stand people sometimes.
What's the matter with you?
I cannot stand people.
Why would you do that, whoever you are?
It blows my mind away to think that somebody had to express that as the credits are rolling. He couldn't wait to get on board his computer and jump into his loser message board and chat rooms and talk about how George Lucas raped his childhood. He had to take it out on 11-year-old Adam. And if I took you there, Adam, you pointed that guy out to me, I might have some speaks with him.
FJ DeSanto has a great story about, I won't name names here, but he's got a great story about a well-known pundit in the world of Star Trek. And he was at the movie theater when this guy happened to be seeing Star Trek Into Darkness. And as everyone's filing out of the theater, this guy's literally got people helping him out of the theater as he's hyperventilating. He's so angry about it. He's breathing into a bag, a paper bag.
He needs people to help him? Who would help that guy?
His friends that were there with him, I guess. Oh, God. But, to hear FJ tell it, it's just so damn funny. All right. Well, on that note, let's check in with Patreon. What's new, Patreon?
Go ahead, Swank. Do it.
What's new, Patreon? Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Listeners, you have no idea how many years that's been bottled up in young Jason. Does you feel better now?
Yeah, I do. I got it out of my system. Thank you.
Well, we have so much going on at RFR on Patreon. Just this week alone, so much is happening. You know Patreon is the place you can go to get bonus exclusive podcasts, RFR podcasts you can't get anywhere else, full show video, ad-free programming, and so much more. And what a great community over there. We have RFR VIPs. We have a crew of them, and you can join. Anyone can join the tier. When you join that tier, you get the opportunity to host a show with me called RFR Q&A. And RFR Q&A is Star Wars, etc., whatever you want to talk about. The VIP determines what the topics of conversation are. We have some great VIPs hosting RFR Q&A this week. We have RFR Q&A number 191, Star Wars School, with RFR VIP Tanya from San Diego. And she is a teacher, and she uses Star Wars in the classroom, and that makes her the coolest teacher around. So she has all kind of great things that we talk about, everything from her visits to Star Wars celebrations, to the Disney parks, Rancho Obi-Wan. She actually has Star Wars textbooks in her collection that we take a look at. And she's an all-around amazing person. So that's Tanya hosting RFR Q&A number 191. And it's a great one. We also released RFR Q&A 192. Being a good Star Wars dad is the topic. We're with RFR VIP Nate Wenzel, who has just become a new father, well, within the last year, but this is his first appearance on the Q&A as a young father. So we talk about the best way is to pass the lightsaber to your child, sharing the wars.
You got to make sure you give him the right end. You don't want to give him the burning end.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You pass that.
But, we discuss everything from how old they should be, what the viewing order of the films should be, Galaxy Edge trips, things like that. And Nate is all ears because he's primed to indoctrinate his young son, Miles, into the world of Star Wars. So that's a fun conversation. And a lot of times I go into these things, I don't know what these listeners, these VIPs are going to talk about, and they surprise me all the time. And it's just some really great, fun conversations. We have RFR VIP Suds, local Chicago area Star Wars fan Suds, and he will be hosting a Q&A later this week, probably over the weekend. And also over the weekend, you can look for the return of the Babu Freaks. It's that episode is called Freak Your Enthusiasm. We talk a lot about collecting, and we look forward to the final season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. So, there's just so much going on at RFR and Patreon. Like I said, full show video in addition to the bonus podcasts. If you become a member, no matter what tier you are, you have access to all 192 episodes of RFR Q&A. And then when you get up into higher tiers, you get more podcasts, you get more videos, you get more opportunities to host shows, to hang out with me and Jason Swank as VIPs at events like the RFR Rooftop Bash that happened in Anaheim for Star Wars Celebration. And we have something cooking for this year for May the 4th be with you. It's pretty much a fish at this point. We are committed to doing our first live show in 2 years, and it'll be happening on May the 4th. When? Where? You just have to wait for the announcement, which will be coming in the next week or two. So I've seen a lot of speculation online. No one's even close to guessing this one. It's going to be interesting, and I think we're going to have a really great time on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, 2024. And you'll find out why in an upcoming RFR. But if our VIPs are going to be in attendance for that event, we will treat them like VIPs. So become a VIP or just become a supporter. Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. That's where you want to go. Weekly podcasts, full show videos, ad-free shows, and a great community of Star Wars fans. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
Oh, yes, we have news. Do we have news? Star Wars rumors kicking things off.
Yes.
And Jeff Snyder back behind the hot mic.
That's right. Now, there's a lot of people throwing Star Wars rumors out there into the internet. But entertainment reporter Jeff Snyder, via his program, The Hot Mic, features Star Wars rumors that often come true. It was Jeff who mentioned a couple of months ago that The Mandalorian and Grogu would be a film. Jeff Snyder has a good connection inside Lucasfilm, who feeds him quality information. And a lot of the bloggers and YouTubers you run across online basically take Jeff Snyder's interviews, and a lot of times they run with them as if they are their own. Well, we give credit around here, and we're giving credit to Jeff Snyder and the Hot Mic. We have some highlights from a big collection of Star Wars rumors that he threw at us. And again, like I said, these are coming from a place of legitimacy because he has inside connections. The first one we're going to listen to is the rumors about the Rey film and when it will be released. Remember, right before the holiday or right after the holidays, when all of this stuff will. Man, did we squeeze a lot into Star Wars January this year? We really did, without any shows, without any movies, just a lot of news, a lot of rumors, a lot of buzz. Let's jump into the rumor mill.
Most people thought that the Filoni movie was going to be after the Rey movie. But from what I understand, from what I gather, I think Filoni is going to be busy dealing with all the Star Wars, just like the whole universe. Yeah. He still has to write season 2 of Ahsoka. So I have a feeling that Filoni's movie is going to be after Mangold's movie. So you can count on, if 2026 has 2 Star Wars movies, then you can count probably on Mangold in 2027 and Filoni in 2028.
All right, so that December 17th, 2027 date that is already on the Disney calendar, most likely to be the Mangold film, not the Filoni film.
Yes. And you know what? This all sort of adds up, really, when you think about it. Because Dave's not going to start working on his Mandoverse film when he still has a full season of Ahsoka staring him right in the face.
Right.
So, and of course, he has been elevated to this executive position at Lucasfilm that puts a lot more on his plate. So that makes sense. And also, according to Kathy Kennedy, statements she made at Star Wars Celebration London when she said the Filoni film was 6 or 7 years away. It all adds up.
Right.
It all adds up.
Well, it's nice that they're on the same page for a change, it seems like. But, and also Dave's, he's conducting this whole orchestra now at this point. So he's going to, I would imagine that a lot of this kind of rejiggering here at the end of 2023 with Mandalorian and Grogu and slotting these films in the way they are, Ahsoka season 2, and then Dave's film. I think that's all part of Filoni's strategy. I think this shows a much more, I don't know. I think it's just a more solid strategy than what we've seen before, which just felt a lot of like, just throw everything against the wall. Let's see what sticks. There seems to be a little bit more method behind this madness so far. I mean, we'll see if it unfolds that way. I like to think that that's Filoni being in this position.
I'd like to know who had the voice at the table that said, we should make a Mandalorian film. Where did that idea come from? Was that pitched by Favreau and Filoni? Was that thrown at Favreau and Filoni by Kathy Kennedy? Or did somebody high up in Disney say, hey, Mandalorian's a success. Lucasfilm is having trouble getting a film off the ground. It only makes common sense to take their most successful property and boost it theatrically. Because you're killing a couple birds with one stone in that way.
It makes
still
all
getting
the
the
sense
story
in the
out.
world. It's so right in front of them. It's amazing that it took them this long to find it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think some of that is just, it's overthinking. It's making it more complicated than it needs to be. But let's just hope that the ship has been righted. We've got Filoni in there. He's going to be kind of, running the whole circus. And that, I think that is going to make a big difference. I hope, at least if it doesn't make a big difference in, some of these erratic hirings and firings, at least it'll make a difference in terms of the stories that's being told throughout these films and making sure that they align in a certain way and that, that there's consistency. I mean, Ahsoka was what Ahsoka was, but it certainly lined up beautifully with Rebels. Now, you could say that it lined up too much, that there was too much of an entry fee, cost of entry going into it. Fine, you can argue that, but you can't argue that it didn't really butt in like beautiful carpentered dovetails together perfectly. And that's Dave Filoni.
I believe that's right. And I also think there's, you have your success with The Mandalorian, but to bring back a character like Rey, where there's been so much equity dumped into that character in that era of Star Wars, it seems silly just to let it die on the vine. Regardless of what your feelings are about the sequel trilogy or my feelings, I just think that with proper guidance and allowing the story to grow in a way in which everyone has confidence in it, then you can maybe make something good with those characters, with characters like Rey and Finn and Poe. It's just everything with the sequel trilogy was so rushed. One step forward they would take 2 steps back, and they would fire the writer. They would start ghosting George Lucas. They would fire the director. They would fire several writers with The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, The Rise of Skywalker is such a hot mess. I'm surprised that film was even made. But I think if you do it right, you can take all of this equity you've dumped into the character in that era and make something decent out of it.
Well, you could probably make a decent film. I don't know if they're ever going to, if those characters will ever take off into the stratosphere of any of the prequel or original trilogy characters or even Ahsoka. I don't know. Jury's still out.
Yeah.
That nostalgia has not quite kicked in yet for the sequel trilogy. It will happen. We've been around this long enough to know that it will happen. Now, will it happen to the degree that it has with the prequels and Clone Wars? We don't know, but it is a factor. And, it used to be 30 years it took for nostalgia to kick in. Now it's 15, 20 years for nostalgia to kick in.
Yeah, because things happen so quickly.
Right.
Trends change in a rapid fire way. But I just don't want to see Disney making the same mistakes George Lucas did by putting the entire franchise on ice and letting all the characters age out, all the actors age out to the point where it's silly to see them running around being those characters. They're too old. And, that could be argued about, for as great as a shape Harrison Ford is in as his age, there were times during that Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny film when you're just like, I don't know. I don't see an 80-year-old doing all this. You can only suspend disbelief so much.
Right.
So I'm just glad that they're bringing the prequel actors back like Hayden and Ewan and giving them fresh stuff to do while they're still recognizable as those characters. George really dropped the ball. He really dropped the ball. He had solid gold, but he isolated himself so much where all of the weight of that solid gold was on his back, and his back broke as a result. So Star Wars got put on ice for 10 years. I mean, even longer, 16 years if you want to go from film to film, from Return of the Jedi to The Phantom Menace. That's 16 years. He should have been making follow-ups to the original trilogy, in my opinion. By that point, he should have immediately followed Return of the Jedi with the prequel trilogy. He should have immediately done that. But he was gassed. He was out, man. He was done. He was toast. So, I mean, sometimes life gets in the way. What are you going to do? You can't, I'm sitting here blaming George saying he dropped the ball, but we all have lives. We're all just people,
Well, he didn't want to.
Sometimes
I don't think
it just
he ever
gets
wanted to be the Star Wars guy. Even after Return of the Jedi, I think he realized that was going to be the epitaph on his tombstone, but he had other plans. He wanted to make other movies.
Well, sometimes, it's something we learn in Star Wars. Sometimes you can't outrun your destiny.
That is
that's
true.
a lesson taught in Star Wars. And George Lucas will have Star Wars creator on his tombstone. Whether, he took 16 years off or not. That's always going to be his thing. So, I mean, nobody's going to say, here lies the creator of Willow. Come on.
Well, Willow's in a grave all to its own. If Rey comes out in December of 2026, that will be 7 years after the last Star Wars film was in theaters. That's crazy to think about that.
Daisy turned 21 on the set of The Force Awakens. She just recently turned 31. So there's a decade of difference between her first stepping into the character and today.
Yeah. Well, she looks great.
I mean,
she doesn't really look much different.
No. That's right. That's why you got to strike the iron while it's still hot.
That's right.
Strike Daisy while she's still hot.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right, but I enjoyed saying
the idea. I get the idea. Well, they definitely, this was a strategy to some extent, making Star Wars in the theaters scarce and focusing on the small screen. I think that what's going to happen, I think history is going to be retconned to show that they took Star Wars away from the big screen only to sort of till up the soil and create new growth in Star Wars with the streaming series, so that would then lead the audience and those characters, propel them to a feature film. I think that's the way they're sort of, again, going to retcon this in the future. Looking back, you're already starting to see some of that narrative. Oh, the genius of establishing the Mandalorian and Grogu for all these years on television, making it a huge hit, and now they're going to the big screen. I don't think that was their thought when they started making The Mandalorian. I don't really think that it was, we're creating a new universe to eventually take onto the big screen.
No, I
think they ran away scared from the theaters.
I think they recognized the potential of what they were doing on TV could eventually grow into a feature film franchise. I think the potential of that had to have been constantly been floated around Lucasfilm, but they just couldn't make anything happen theatrically. So they got so lucky that the streaming and the priority, the way that Disney prioritized streaming, was like the luckiest thing that ever happened to Star Wars. I mean, Lucasfilm could be all boarded up and the building could be condemned for teardown if the streaming stuff didn't happen, because what would they have put in the theaters if they didn't have that streaming outlet? I don't think that Disney executives would have been sitting back saying, oh, please take your time. They've never shown that that's what they do. They need it constantly out there, reaffirming the $4.5 billion they spent on the thing. What would have come out in theaters if there was no streaming service? I'm afraid to even think about it.
Nothing would have. What I'm saying is I don't think this was a grand plan.
No, nothing's been a grand plan for Lucasfilm. But things have fallen into their laps.
Yes.
And the streaming opportunities was definitely something that offered a little bit of life support to Star Wars. But I'm just saying, if they didn't have that streaming service, what would we have seen?
we probably would have seen the Kenobi on the big screen in some fashion. That would have made it to the big screen.
You got it. That's true.
But nothing else. I don't think they would have ever just created an original piece like The Mandalorian and put it on in theaters. Too big of a risk. Way too big of a risk.
Or maybe they would have dusted off Guillermo del Toro's Jabba the Hutt idea. I mean, there are things that could have happened, but I don't even want to think about it, because I think something would have been released just to keep Star Wars out in the public spotlight, and as a result, there might have been some very clumsy content created.
Right. Now, here's a question that I don't think anybody's asked. What if the Mandalorian film comes out in in May, and it's this huge hit, sets records, right? $500, $600 million. Okay?
Right.
Then
it's
what
like the
happens?
new Avengers.
Right. Then what happens to the priorities? What happens to Mandalorian season 4? What happens to Disney Plus? Can they restrain themselves from saying, "Oh, now the dam is broken. Now all of our ideas are going to go to the big screen"? I hope they have the discipline, right, to not just look at the next big shiny thing, and deconstruct, like our caller said, dissect the road to their success. And should the Mandalorian be wildly successful, which it could be.
Hollywood is largely fueled by knee-jerk reactions. So I think they'll go whole hog should the Mandalorian and Grogu feature film take off. I think they'll dump a lot of resources into continuing that success.
Mandalorian and
I hope
Grogu
they get the
2?
opportunity to do it.
Is that what we're gonna see? Yeah.
Well, I personally don't think we'll ever see The Mandalorian as a streaming show again. I don't think there's any more seasons.
Oh, really? Katie Sackhoff disagrees. Katie Sackhoff is on.
Bring her on. Is she coming on the show right now to debate it with me? I'm waiting.
No,
it's like Katie Sackhoff.
No.
Oh boy,
no, Katie Sackhoff
what a surprise!
She was on a podcast recently, and she was talking about season 4 of The Mandalorian.
Okay, what did she say?
She just said it hasn't started yet. And she said that's all.
It's never going to start. She better not be sitting around that phone waiting for it to ring, because she's got a movie set she needs to be on. She's sitting there worried about the future of Star Wars on TV when they're making a feature film. I don't know. Maybe they'll spin off Bo-Katan into her own streaming series, something along those lines.
Yeah.
But no, I think once you cross over from television to films, there's no going back.
It's been done before, but
when?
X-Files.
You're right. You're right. The X-Files sure did. Yeah, but again,
Star Trek went back. Different
in this
cast,
scenario,
but it went back.
Well, yeah, but that's spin-off stuff.
Right. That's true.
In this scenario, we are saying The Mandalorian and Grogu is a huge success.
Right.
Even by committing those characters to the movies, I think you've closed the door shut on the future for The Mandalorian as a streaming series. I really believe that. I don't think there's any going back. So, but I mean, I could be wrong, but
especially if it's a big hit. If it comes out and it's sort of also ran, then I think the jury's still out on whether it could show up in subsequent seasons at some point. But I do agree with you. If it's a bona fide, undisputable hit, blockbuster hit, it's not going back.
I mean, the main reason they brought the X-Files back was because those movies flopped. And they had an opportunity
the first one was a huge hit. The first one was a huge hit. First one was a huge hit. They just wanted to be able to tell the story that they had been building up with limited budget, limited special effects. They wanted to be able to sort of take it to new heights and then bring it back down. It was a very, very big hit that summer. The second one was not. It was pretty much a flop
That's what I must be
had-
thinking of.
That was after the series had wrapped. But I mean,
Yes.
they very consciously, and this is what The Mandalorian could do. We don't know that. In the case of X-Files, the film was stitched very much into the fabric of the series, both what came before and what came after. It was almost like they took, maybe a 2 or 3 parter, put it on the big screen, gave it a big budget, beefed up the special effects, and then the season continued after that. The series continued after that. That could be what they're going to do with Mandalorian. That could be part of the strategy. We're going to just blow it up really big and then settle back down and tell a smaller story. But the other thing that's hard to keep in mind is that this Mando and Grogu isn't necessarily the big Avengers team-up film. That's the Filoni film.
Right.
So we don't really know.
So it's obviously going somewhere.
Right, right. It's got to go somewhere. Anyway,
The
back to these rumors.
X-Files.
We should go back to these
The first X-Files film, I just want to say, earned $189 million worldwide against a budget of $66 million. So yeah, it was a big box office success. It got mixed reviews, but I mean, what do you expect from critics? It was a film made for the fans.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I'm sure not all critics were on board. But the second one was floppish, I believe.
Yeah, the teacher.
All right,
from Head of
we're
the Class
going
in
on.
there. All right, Tangent City. Back to rumors. Shawn Levy, what's going on with him?
Well, I'd like to know. His film hasn't even been officially announced by Lucasfilm nor Disney, but Shawn has been loose-lipped about talking about it. He's confirmed the rumors. So I'd say that's a pretty good sign that this sucker is in some level of pre-production right now. Even if it's at like concept art stages or whatnot. But Jeff Snyder has some rumors to share about the Shawn Levy project and what his film is actually all about.
So the other big part of it was the Shawn Levy stuff. Shawn Levy, we know, is developing his own Star Wars project, although no one really knows what that is. Well, I'm told that project does have an element. I don't know if Rey is front and center in it, but Rey is a character in Shawn Levy's movie. Now, is it Daisy Ridley's Rey or is it an older Rey, right? We heard those rumors back in the day about maybe Helen Mirren being positioned as an older Rey. So I don't know if Shawn Levy's movie, if A, Rey is the lead character, or B, if Rey is Daisy Ridley age, or if she's, she could be someone in her 40s or 50s, or someone who's 70 or 80 like Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren's doing those Uber Eats commercials. I just saw her the other day. Like, oh, look, there's old lady Rey. Isn't she a dame? Isn't that Dame?
Yeah,
Helen
she's
Mirren,
Dame.
yeah. She's just sitting on the
sure
floor eating chips, waiting for her Uber Eats to arrive.
And I hope when I'm her age, I'm sitting on the floor eating chips, eating anything,
All right, this is big news. So Shawn Levy, Rey, still alive. So we're talking now about 2 Rey films in development.
That's right. This could be a sequel to the film that Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is working on. It could be something totally out of the ordinary and might be setting the foundation for a whole new cast of characters to invade Star Wars with
God, do you think they would time jump that quickly? You get a Daisy Ridley Rey film, and then just a couple of years you get old lady Rey?
It's confusing, isn't it?
It really is.
And the idea of the older Rey was developed by Damon Lindelof in the draft that he was writing for the Daisy Ridley film.
Mm-hmm.
And we have more on the Lindelof film coming up soon. I don't know how you would execute a story that has such a massive time jump. I mean, we're talking 30, 40 years, right? So, I mean, maybe even 50 years if we're talking about a 30-year-old Rey in the Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy film and then an 80-year-old Rey in the Shawn Levy film. That's a stretch. That is a stretch.
Is it possible that we're talking about the same film.
It could be. Yeah. Maybe there's time jumping going on. Maybe it's old Ray reminiscing about something that happened in the past that's affecting the characters in the present. And then she goes, well,
yes. Okay. All right. See, I wasn't going there. I was going at like what you're saying is maybe there's a really interconnected story here. So this could be a little bit of a handoff where maybe it's, so they're jumping back and forward through time, or maybe the seeds of the Levy movie are being kind of sown with this initial SOC movie. I hadn't thought of that. It could be like a Superman 1, Superman 2 type thing where they're making them concurrently to lock up together.
Well, it just seems weird that they're working on 2 Ray films with 2 different directors at the same time. I mean, that just seems odd to me.
Maybe Kathleen Kennedy's just going to go with whichever one she likes better and fire the other one.
That could happen, and that leads us to our 4th rumor here.
Oh no. I hate being right, especially when I'm joking.
And that could be, we might be seeing the seeds being planted for an eventual Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy backup plan.
Oh.
Yes, Sharmeen is still on board, but you know how Lucasfilm goes through directors quickly.
True.
This hire has been questioned, right? She doesn't have a ton of experience.
Right.
And so if it does, for whatever reason, go sour and she, either quits or is fired or whatever, if for whatever reason she exits the project, depending on scheduling, because again, Shawn Levy is one of the busiest people in Hollywood. It took me like 3 minutes just to scroll down on his IMDb with all the projects that he has in development, because he's a producer as well, 21 Laps. It's my understanding that Shawn Levy could either slip in to direct that movie, or Shawn Levy's movie sort of becomes the next movie, or maybe Shawn Levy's movie could be folded into Sharmeen's movie. I don't know. But like, he's clearly interested in exploring Ray and that stuff. And so if the Ray movie suddenly needs a director, depending on scheduling, he may be the guy they turn to, since they're already in business with him. And he is going to be wrapping up Deadpool 3 relatively soon. I mean, that movie's coming out in a few months.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of pressure on that. That they're looking at this Deadpool movie with Wolverine to really be the defibrillator paddles on the MCU. So he's going from one pressure cooker into potentially another one. But this idea of it being an actual backup plan, I mean, has the Kathleen Kennedy MO of blowing through creatives gotten to the point where you've got perhaps people cleaning up her messes or anticipating her messes by creating a redundancy in projects just to make sure these things actually happen in spite of her? Or despite
I think something like that. I think something like that has already happened in recent history behind the scenes at Disney/Lucasfilm. And I'm talking about that mysterious Kevin Feige project, which Kathy seemed like she wanted nothing to do with. She never officially announced it. She bristles at the mention of it at any time. But we've heard Kevin Feige talk about it, so it obviously there was some fire behind the smoke. Mm-hmm. And there was even a writer attached to the project with Kevin Feige. So
that's right.
There was something definitely going on there. And it seems like it was something going on beyond Kathy's control. Because the guy who leaked it to the press that Kevin Feige was developing a Star Wars film, it wasn't Kathy Kennedy. It was then board member of Disney, Alan Horn, who was a vice president mucky muck over there under Bob Iger's reign the first time Iger was in charge of the company. Alan Horn is the one who made that announcement to the media. And I'm sure that there was some.
He was the one that made the Feige comment first.
Yes. He's the one who made that information public. And I bet the day that happened, I bet there were some dishes flying around in the lunchroom at Lucasfilm because
Wow.
it seems like Kathy Kennedy wanted nothing to do with that. So that could have been some early maneuvering back during Bob Iger's first reign as head honcho at Disney. Now we're hearing rumors about Shawn Levy. Here's a guy again. His film has never been officially announced. It seems real sketchy that 2 Rey films should be in various levels of pre-production at the same time. It just seems very fishy to me. So it almost seems like there is a plan B in place in case Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy doesn't follow through with being director of the film. There are many factors involved there. Her lack of experience directing a major Hollywood tentpole franchise film comes into play. She has 0 experience doing that. In my opinion, she leapfrogged a bunch of other directors who had been working on Star Wars in the streaming world. She somehow leapfrogged over all of them to land this choice Rey film. But I mean, she might be up for the job. I mean, I don't know. Or maybe the social media will get to her, or something will happen where maybe she'll say the wrong thing in public. I don't think she's necessarily said the wrong thing in public.
Yes.
In relations to the Star Wars film, other than that rather innocent and kind of misguided comment about it's about time a female told a story in the Star Wars universe. That's kind of just like whatever.
Shaped a story. Yeah. Which
you can kind of let that fly. A lot of fans got really upset at that, and it created this whole discussion about females directing Star Wars films that would have never happened.
Well, here's what I think. I want to say this because I think that sometimes it's so easy in this climate that we're in with social media and all of the different factors that go into sort of creating sides and all that. And I was having a discussion with someone on the official Rebel Force Radio Facebook group about this. And I was saying that, what we try to do here is we try to offer conversation that has nuance and color, and you can entertain. Like, I feel comfortable enough with Mac that I can throw out a wacky concept or idea or hypothesis, and I know it's wacky, and he's going to bounce it back to me, or maybe he'll go, "Oh, wait a minute, there's something about that," and we'll have a conversation. So it's very freeing in that sense, and I think it's important to understand sometimes the way people are interpreting these public proclamations that somebody like a Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy makes. I think what the concern was is that she was going to come at this project as a woman, for women, by women, and it was going to be all around the perspective of being a woman instead of just writing a Star Wars movie for an audience that is probably going to be 70-80% male buying the tickets, 20 to 30% female. That's the reality of action adventure films. Look it up. It's true. So in the way that her comments were maybe ham-fisted yet innocent, some of the reaction is understandable and can be explained in a way that is less vitriolic than what people have say, "Oh, well, you're a chauvinist. You don't like women. You don't want women in Star Wars." I don't know a single fan in my life, and I know a lot of Star Wars fans, that don't think that women should be in Star Wars. It's the most ridiculous and preposterous attitude to have about a fan base, especially the Star Wars fan base. So again, nuance, context, it matters. So her comments needed context and nuance, and so do some of the people's concerns also need the same treatment.
I think fans just largely want to see a good story being told without having some message really beaten into them.
Right.
Because I think there were attempts to beat a message into Star Wars fans via a film like The Last Jedi. It was just a little too much in your face.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting comment here from Jeff Snyder. And he discusses why Damon Lindelof got fired. And his reasoning behind all of this might be of comfort to some fans who are a little on the edge about the idea of a very politically juiced Star Wars film. Here's what Jeff Snyder has to say about why Damon Lindelof got removed from the project and replaced by Stephen Knight.
I think that whatever Damon Lindelof was up to, that was veering into a political area.
Yeah.
And that's when they pulled the plug and pumped the brakes. And they said, we got to go get Stephen Knight because we don't love where Damon's draft is heading. Right. So I don't think that they did that to then hire someone who's going to go make a super political movie.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Right. And so he's specifically talking about Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy when he says they wouldn't fire Lindelof and then just keep her on board if she's going to make a hyper-political Star Wars film. And I see the logic behind that.
Absolutely.
And this is the first time I'm hearing that Lindelof's script was problematic because it had so much political mojo behind it. So that's the first time I'm hearing this.
Yeah, it's very much like putting a puzzle together. Like we just found a piece. Jeff gave us a piece about Lindelof's script perhaps being politically charged, politically motivated, agenda-driven, whatever. Now that puts the Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy hiring in proper context or in better context. So you might say dissecting a little bit.
Don't say dissecting unless you got a frog in front of me. But so those are the latest scoops from.
Those are great.
From Jeff Snyder, and we'll be monitoring him. And I recommend you check out his show, The Hot Mic, which you can find it on YouTube and elsewhere.
Moving on, Daisy Ridley making the rounds. What's this movie that she's promoting? Sometimes I Think About Dying.
Ooh,
that sounds like a real upper.
Yeah, real warm and fuzzy. Well, yeah, she's out making the rounds promoting that, and she's appearing everywhere lately, it seems. So we have Daisy Ridley interview highlights this week. We might have more next week. Everyone wants to know what her future is all about in Star Wars. And she appeared on the Today Show, and they had a little interesting back and forth. Daisy revealing what she knows about the new Jedi Order story and what she doesn't know.
I actually haven't read a script yet, but the story I've been told is fantastic, and I'm there. I'm in it.
Daisy, that's a really good answer. Good job. All your publicists, your whole entourage, they're all smiling.
That's it? That's all you can tell us?
You're going to make it blush. It's great. I'm getting warm. It's a very worthwhile story, and I think Sharmeen's going to do an amazing job.
That's so
Speaking of Sharmeen, I just have to ask, because there are some of the, I'd say, extreme Star Wars fans who have made this a conversation on the internet about how they don't want a female director. Which seems bizarre because episodes of The Mandalorian were directed by females. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy has been overseeing all of this. So, what is your take on that?
I think my take is things get blown out of proportion. And the interactions I've ever had with people have been nothing but wonderful and supportive. And honestly, the day we announced that I was coming back at Celebration last year, you cannot imagine the joy and goodwill in that room. So I've only ever been embraced. And I think we're going to make a great film.
Good for you, Daisy. Don't take the bait. Don't take the bait. The irony of this question. First of all, I love that it's extreme Star Wars fans. I love when they throw that word extreme in there. What makes someone an extreme fan? How many action figures you have? So that's always funny. Because she's saying it, and these are like dog whistle terms like extreme right wing, extreme left wing. Now they're using extreme as a way to describe a Star Wars fan. Not diehard, not passionate. They're using this word extreme. Very politically charged word.
That's so true. That's so true.
And the accusation is that these extreme Star Wars fans are going online and saying they don't want a female director. I've seen that nowhere. I've seen people criticize Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. I've seen people say that she's not experienced in this type of filmmaking. I've seen all kinds of criticism of comments that she's made in the past. This show took the audacious steps to put all of these comments that she made in their proper context. so that you're not, listening to a mainstream media clip of her talking about Star Wars and then going into saying that she makes men uncomfortable. So who's the dishonest ones here? And the fact that Daisy comes back and says, I think that stuff just gets kind of blown out of proportion. It's not really, I don't really see it in my world. She didn't take the bait, and I'm really proud of her. But as we'll talk about in a little bit, that didn't change the fact that mainstream media still got the headlines that they wanted about the horrible treatment that Daisy Ridley has endured because of Star Wars. That's the second part of this.
Well, some people cultivate their approach to covering Star Wars by being in that mud. It's out there. It's all over the place. And I get fatigued by it. And I said to myself, when we were at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim 2 years ago, I said to myself, wow, you could almost breathe in the passion that people have for Star Wars. And there are 60, 70,000 people here today. That means something. Yeah. That to me is the only census review I have to do about the state of Star Wars fandom. Sometimes when you're sitting alone in your home in, Des Moines, Iowa or someplace, and you don't know any fellow Star Wars fans, and your only connection to the fan base is via the internet or via YouTube videos or whatever, you can get beaten down by that to the point where you actually believe that a majority of Star Wars fans hate Star Wars. How many times have you heard people say nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans? It's no. Hey, we're dissecting, dummy. But still, some people do make it a priority. And sometimes those people can have really loud voices. But when we were in Anaheim, I said to myself, don't forget this energy you're feeling here, because this is the real deal. This is how Star Wars fans feel about Star Wars. There's excitement, there's anticipation, there's a buzz,
curiosity.
And you could feel it. And curiosity too. And curiosity can lead you into some weird places sometimes, but all of the above I think is legitimate. I think Daisy is coming from that same perspective. Her interactions with fans are positive. So Daisy looks at Star Wars fans through a positive light. She's not taking this filtered version that certain media want you to believe.
Yeah.
So I'm happy I've been able to maintain that that knowledge that you can put 70,000 people together in a convention center and get a really positive buzz off of it.
Well,
and we're talking about Star Wars.
And Lucasfilm PR needs to understand that Daisy Ridley did more good for Star Wars fans and the brand in that moment than I've seen official channels do in a very long time, because she endeared herself and she earned trust with the fans that she was going to represent them on a big platform like the Today Show in the right light. She earned a lot of trust.
Lucasfilm is too willing to turn the spotlight on fans that ruin it for everyone. They're too willing to focus on the bad apples in the cart.
Do you remember?
And exploit that. And that's what gives a lot of the hatred a bigger platform, is when Lucasfilm has their knee-jerk reactions.
Do you remember after the premiere of Kenobi, we wake up the next day and Ewan McGregor, who I love, respect, is filming an iPhone video calling out the evil, racist fans. It was just talk about sucking all the oxygen out of the room. As you were saying, Jim, we're in there with 60, 70,000 diehard Star Wars fans. We're eating everything up that Hayden and Ewan and the whole cast of Kenobi is dropping at us, watching the show, doing live podcasts, from our hotel rooms. And that's what we wake up to. It was so disheartening and unnecessary, in my opinion. So unnecessary.
And Ewan didn't grab the phone on his own. And he didn't say to himself, boy, I got to put out a social media message about this right away. No, he was told by Lucasfilm to do that.
Yes.
Or they asked him.
Sure.
And they painted a picture of fandom that really only spotlighted a small fraction of loud haters. And that's what you want to prioritize? That's what you want to spend your time on? That's like the worst marketing ever. And you're trying, and also
Terrible.
You're trying to put some bubble wrap around yourself too, for when the Kenobi series did go off the rails from time to time. They put the bubble wrap around themselves to say, well, it's nothing we did. We made a perfect story. It's all the haters out there who are causing problems. Right. That's where the real problem is. No, man, look in the mirror sometimes.
Yeah.
Stop enjoying the smell of your own farts, Lucasfilm.
Let us enjoy it. Let us smell it.
And stop turning the spotlight on the most negative aspect of the Star Wars fan base. It's not worth it. It's a waste of time and energy.
I look for the next Star Wars Celebration to have a whole panel on toxic fandom. And they'll invite all these toxic fans, and that'll get all kinds of coverage.
Why does Lucasfilm keep calling us, Jason? I got another message here that Lucasfilm called. What's going on here? What the hell? All right.
Okay.
We would be the
Daisy.
wrong people to call. We'd actually get people excited about Star Wars in that convention center. So don't worry about us. All right. Happy, Sad, Confused. That's Josh Horowitz's show. We like Josh. We've been monitoring his interviews for years and years because here's a guy who's a mainstream entertainment reporter who has access to all of the actors that are out promoting whatever big Hollywood feature they're in. And they all get presented to Josh Horowitz, who manages to sneak in Star Wars questions all the time. And he asks the questions fans would ask. That's what I like about it. It's not the Today Show where they're tripping over themselves to joke about how Daisy has to keep everything secret and quiet. That's something I'm really getting sick of. Look, we all know that Lucasfilm likes to keep things quiet and secretive and stuff, but does that have to be just exploited to death with every interview? You ask the question. Don't think that she's not going to give you some kind of answer, but when you start saying things like, oh, you can't talk about it. Oh, is that all you're going to say? You know, like Al Roker was practically vomiting on himself to make this joke over and over again during Daisy's appearance on the Today Show. And I like Al Roker, but he came off like he sounded like a buffoon. If you listen to that recording, he's like, is that all you could say? It's like, dude, she's talking. Let her talk.
Imagine teeing up a question where you go, look, now I know you can't answer this question, and I know you won't answer this question, and I know you've got a whole team of PR people sitting around there looking at you, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah. Then I'm going to make fun of the question I just asked.
Right.
And keep talking about how you can't talk while you're talking.
It's ridiculous. All right. Well, hopefully this next question
so happy, sad,
with
confused.
Josh is better. So,
Josh is great. So he knows how to surgically insert questions fans want answered. And he talks to Daisy about the new Rey film. And Daisy says it goes in a different direction for Star Wars.
Honestly, if it wasn't a story worth telling, I wouldn't be doing it. But I was like, ooh. It's like a fun direction.
It's going to be fascinating. You're going to have gone from like the new person.
I know. The youngest on set.
To
like an adult.
Yeah, you have to be Mark Hamill.
Brian
Harrison.
Burke, who worked with JJ a lot. When I told him about it, he was like, Daisy, you look the same age. I was like, thank you so much. But time's passed. It's going to be that is going to be strange. But again, it's like a different sort of.
Yeah.
And also I was like, what if I can't remember how to do it? Like before each job, I'm like, what if I can't remember how to do this thing?
What do I do with this lightsaber? Where does it go?
Zoom.
No, you don't have to do the sound effect. We know that.
I do. It's all like this crazy old ride.
She's nervous to say anything. Yeah, we know that. Yeah. But she does say, she uses the word fun when talking about the film. It's going in a fun direction.
Yes.
I like the sound of fun. And it's just, she keeps reiterating, it's just so different. And that's why I think this might incorporate an old Rey and a young Rey in the same film. It might.
It very well may.
You know, didn't they kind of make that young Indiana Jones Chronicles? Didn't they sort of bookend that with old Indy telling a story about his youth? And then the bulk of the show would be the youthful Indiana Jones. And then at the end, old Indy would wrap it up with some sort of moral lesson or insight.
Well, and the interesting thing about that is that you can sort of carve two paths. So now you've established a timeline where Rey is older, you know, and then you've got the sort of the 30-something Rey. So you can build onto those stories. So you can introduce characters in the older Rey timeline. So it is a clever way of carving more out of the galaxy and the story.
I mean, really, you'd be addressing two different eras,
right?
You know, and then if you include Rey, you're inevitably going to be making reference to the original trilogy gang and everything because she's sort of forged from that.
She's Rey Skywalker.
So yeah, there's a lot of ground you could cover if executed correctly. Daisy also talks to Josh about SOC, the director of the film, and provides us with a little insight on her.
Have you spent some time with Sharmeen yet?
Yeah.
Vibing
She's great.
with her? Yeah.
Her documentaries are quite different, obviously, to what we're going to be doing, but I feel like documentarians have a very particular worldview, like film view, and it tends to be that documentarians go into narratives in like a great way, and obviously watch her episodes of Miss Marvel and stuff too. She's great, and I think her ideas for what this is, and then Steven's script, it's all going to be good.
Yeah. See, that's what I want more of that. Like the fans and well, I shouldn't say fans, but some fans and commentators, we've talked about it, all of the reasons that make Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy an unusual pick. And it is an unusual choice. No question about it. However, Daisy is trying to link her being a documentarian to why it makes sense. She does say, look, there's been a lot of documentary filmmakers that have gone into narrative films. George Lucas followed Francis Ford Coppola around and made a documentary about the making of Finian's Rainbow and did some of that work.
The Rain Man. It was the
Rain Man?
The Rain People, not the Dustin Hoffman film. It was called The Rain People.
Why do I always think of Finian's Rainbow?
Because George met Coppola on the set of that film.
Okay. That's what it was. But
they were both attracted to each other because they were the only guys on set who had beards.
Well, Fred Astaire had a beard, but it was a different kind of beard.
Hello. Swank.
Sorry, that's right. So the Rain People, I don't know anything about that movie, but George did work behind the scenes in capturing a documentary on the making of that film.
Yes.
So
that's I mean, that was a gig that Coppola gave George to sort of get his feet wet, fresh out of USC,
and put food on the table. You know.
Yeah, right.
I think those were the lean years for George. You thought he was skinny because he was anxiety ridden. No, he didn't eat.
A little bit of both helps keep the inches off the waistline, whatever works. Daisy also talked to Variety, and this was a print interview, and she commented on SOC, said her documentaries are amazing. Her idea for the story is cool. No spoilers, but she gave me a rundown of the entire story. If it wasn't amazing, I would have been like, okay, call me in 5 years. But it's a worthwhile endeavor. And so she's saying SOC's idea for the story. Now, is the story itself SOC's? Or does she have an approach for this particular story that seems to be cool? I don't know. Who's bringing the story to the table? It sounds like this is something conceptually that has been in the works at Lucasfilm for quite a while. And I don't know if SOC is inheriting it and then putting her spin on it, or if SOC herself is bringing the story to the table and it's Stephen Wright who's banging it out into a script after Damon Lindelof stumbled by inserting too much political agenda stuff into his draft. These are a lot of questions I'm asking right now. And we may never know.
Jim,
we may never see this movie, you know?
The variety piece that you're referring to, is that the one that's being quoted all over in these various websites about how, she's still upset over the response to Rise of Skywalker, that she was grieving after her last Star Wars movie? Because I look at these, keeping in mind that we just heard her talk about how she has only felt embraced by the Star Wars community, and yet the headlines now, if you just do a news search for Daisy Ridley, headlines are Daisy Ridley still upset over backlash to Rise of Skywalker. Daisy Ridley says Rise of Skywalker outrage is still upsetting. Recalls grieving after her last Star Wars film. Daisy Ridley developed holes in her stomach due to anxiety. Holes in her gut because of intense anxiety. The headlines certainly aren't Daisy Ridley says only feels love from Star Wars fans, only been embraced by Star Wars fandom. It's really interesting to see what they glom onto, while at the same time they try to sort of look down their nose at the toxicity that causes this, yet they're the ones that are constantly hanging a lantern on it, and you have to get a magnifying glass to find it. That's what's so frustrating about this.
That's very true. A lot of that reporting, I think, is reading between the lines a little bit, because Josh does ask in the Happy, Sad, Confused interview, he does ask Daisy what it was like to live through the fallout of the Rise of Skywalker. And Daisy's response to that was primarily, well, it was really Ryan's film that was the divisive one. So it seems like Daisy she had already been through the rodeo once before with The Last Jedi. And then when the Rise of Skywalker happened, I mean, you could just tell that the whole attitude of everyone associated with that film was, thank God it's over. That was the attitude.
I felt it in the theater.
For the Rise of Skywalker was slim.
Mm-hmm.
It was extremely slim. It was like as soon as it was released, it was like, okay, hope you enjoyed it. Let's get back to The Mandalorian on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And that was the message
Grogu
I was getting from Disney and Lucasfilm. So it's hard to say. It just seemed like by the time the Rise of Skywalker happened, it was just, let's just get this thing over with once and for all.
I think I at least have the quote from the Horowitz podcast. If there's another quote out there, that may be, but yeah, Jim, you're absolutely right. He talks about, or she says that it's still upsetting. Let's see, it says the movie along with predecessor. Now this is Variety. So they're not quoting Horowitz's question. So this is Variety saying that the movie Rise of Skywalker generated outrage from fans due to creative decisions that many felt were against the spirit of the franchise. Ridley says, it's still upsetting. You don't want people to feel like you've not served the thing that they're a fan of. But The Last Jedi was so divisive. It felt like the first one, everyone was responsive in the same way. She's talking about Force Awakens. Everybody was responsive in the same way. The second, super divisive. The last one, super divisive. It didn't change how I felt about it. So she's, saying, look, I feel good about having done it and being a part of this. But the second one really derailed things, and the third one derailed things even further. The tenor of the conversation was not about being harassed online by fans, not being driven out of the entertainment business. It's headline writers, clickbait.
Well, and Variety's really beating that drum lately when it comes to interviewing actors. Just recently, they had an interview with Ewan McGregor. And he said that the most difficult thing about being in a panned Star Wars film, a.k.a. The Phantom Menace, was it was weird to be in a film that was hammered and we still had to make 2 more. That's what Ewan said.
Well, that's one way to put it. Yeah.
So it was rough. It was rough for him. He said it was a hard time.
Yeah.
He said, I'm happy that I am this character for a lot of people. But when these films came out, they were so disliked. It was hard. And he does say that he really enjoyed returning to the role in the Kenobi streaming series, and he'd love to do a second season, but there's no talk of it yet because there's a lot going on at Disney right now.
Yeah.
And this is a fresh interview. I mean, Ewan just made these comments this week to Variety. So it seems like Variety is they're really gung-ho on pouring salt into certain actors' wounds when it comes to reviewing their past history with Star Wars. It's like they just rub salt in the wounds. My God.
Well,
it's really no different than all the hatred that Ahmed Best and Jake Lloyd got when the films were released in the first place. All of that hatred was being generated by media outlets like People Magazine, like Variety. They all want to act so above it all.
Right. Yeah. It was the critics that were that caused Ron Howard to write a letter, an op-ed. What was it? Newsweek or Time? I forget who the critic was. One of those two magazines. He was just unnecessarily harsh on Jake Lloyd's performance, and Ron Howard basically took the guy to school, saying, "How dare you be this critical of a child? This is a child." But the thing about Ewan, though, and what makes his commentary interesting is, there's pillow talk going on between he and his wife, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Harrison Syndulla from Ahsoka. So Ewan is very connected, I think, to the things that are going on, I think, at Disney Lucasfilm, for sure.
Yeah, he knows they got a lot of pokers in the fire right now, and the idea of firing up the Kenobi thing again for a second series. While it appears to me that the streaming output is going to be a little more tempered, especially once we roll up to 2026 and Star Wars starts hitting theaters again. Are we going to be getting streaming series concurrently with film releases like we did with Rise of Skywalker and Mandalorian? Or are they going to maybe back off the streaming a little bit because, let's face it, the streaming service hasn't been all that profitable for Disney. I still think they're in the red as far as that goes.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it might just be a shift in priorities once again.
It's interesting. I think that the burnout that the MCU is experiencing, where the films and the streaming series are so connected to one another, that they're building upon each other. I think that it's cool from a fan perspective that you're getting this huge story unfolding, but it does, I think, lead to burnout. So let's say the Mandoverse really goes off and becomes sort of, it becomes a theatrical event when those characters get together. That carves the way for things like a Skeleton Crew, like an Acolyte, to live on Disney Plus and just be a series, just be a streaming series, and be okay with that. There doesn't have to be this, I'm going to watch a season of this, and then the film's coming out that, at the end of it, and then I'm going to watch 2 seasons of this, and then I get a film. I don't feel like it has to be that way. 10 years ago, I might have been salivating at that idea, but now, having lived through it, I do think that it causes fan burnout.
Yeah.
And creative burnout.
I think there's been a big revelation across the board in the industry regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
I meant to say revelation. I said relevation, whatever.
That's the new He-Man.
Whatever.
Show. He-Man, relevation.
But you know what I mean.
I do.
Yes.
What do we got next? Oh, Natasha Liu Bordizzo, the beautiful Natasha Liu Bordizzo.
Stunning.
She is absolutely stunning. Sabine Wren, live action Sabine. Who's she talking to? EW?
Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah.
Yes, EW. This is, just out of, this is not really news-breaking stuff, but just out of a little curiosity. I'd like to know what the Sabine actor, Natasha, thought about her character revealing herself to be something of a Force sensitive, and how that comes into play with the evolution of the character.
I feel like there's been some feedback that the Force was too easy for Sabine, and I was like, what do you mean? I mean, honestly, I think that the concept of the Force being this difficult to attain but attainable state of being that more people could access with hard work and dedication, I think is a really honorable sort of concept that feels very Dave, as well as, the history of the fact that I think George Lucas had originally also said that. But yeah, to me, it's all just metaphorical with how I was relating it to life.
Boy, that is such, we've broken it down on the show many times, this seeming disconnect, and whether it's a real disconnect or whether it is a product of George maybe being too heavy-handed with the midichlorian concept, and then it getting compounded and reinforced by tie-in material like books and comics. I'm glad that Natasha in this interview clip says that this sort of democratizing the Force in such a way that anyone with hard work, dedication can attain it to some degree. She goes, that's very Dave. But then she goes, but that was also very George and his original idea. And the only thing I would push back on there, and not picking on Natasha at all, it's a conversation within fandom, is I don't know that George ever gave up on that idea. I don't think that he did. I think that the midichlorians might have been a little ham-fisted, heavy-handed. I know why they were there. It was there to show that Anakin was the Michael Jordan of Jedi. Not to say that there wasn't room for, throw out another baseball or basketball player. I don't know, but you know the point. There's room for all different skill levels, but it all takes a certain degree of dedication and innate talent and skill and that sort of thing. But there are going to be the LeBrons and the Michael Jordans.
Right. Those guys are your master Jedi.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to see a Star Wars galaxy where Greedo is a Jedi master. I just don't want to see that.
Because he read a book.
I think there's other elements too. It's bringing up Greedo. It's like, how pure is your heart? What kind of person are you? Is the Force going to touch someone who is a petty thief or a gangster? I don't think so. I think the Force discriminates a little bit, based on the type of morality the person exhibits. And then, the cleaner the life is of a person, the more purely good that person is, then the Force looks at that person as a greater candidate. The Force works in mysterious ways, and it has a level of natural selection to it.
Well, to that point, something I'd like to see, if they're going to keep going with this idea that the Force is something that's attainable to every, John and Jane in the galaxy, perhaps. Yoda says in The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke asks, is the dark side more powerful? He says, no, quicker, easier. It might be an interesting idea to have to show some of that, to show how you can, if you try to use it for evil purposes, not for knowledge and defense, but for attack and all of these things, that you might get some instant gratification and be able to do some really terrible things. But where does it lead? And what are the ramifications? And like you said, the Force could self-select, and therefore now all of a sudden you've marked yourself as being, the absolute opposite of someone that's deserving, someone who's using it for selfish reasons. So I think there's a lot of legs to this idea that could be really interesting in future stories.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Force as like a pitcher of water. You're not going to pour it into a cup that has a bunch of holes in it. You're just not going to do that. You're going to find a sturdy chalice in which to pour your Force into, and that's what I think is going on. It's more than just a character wanting or desiring the connection. There has to be something about them that makes them more sensitive to the Force. And that is whether or not they're tapping into the light side of the Force via acts of goodness or the dark side of the Force via acts of evil. Yeah. So, I mean, the other ones who don't even consider things, and they're just very selfish, and they don't have any grand plans for life or anything, you're not going to see them connect to the Force because the Force knows better.
It's not going to waste its Force time.
Right. So, and also she says, well, George Lucas said this, and that always makes me cringe a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, now all of a sudden you're some expert on George Lucas and everything he said. It all goes back to, and I love her, but Fennec Shand, actress. She was on ER. What's her name? Ming-Na Wen.
Ming-Na Wen. Yeah.
Ming-Na.
Great.
She was only Ming-Na when she was on ER. She was just Ming-Na on ER. But now she's Ming-Na Wen. She made a quote following that disastrous episode of the Book of Boba Fett where you had the Vespa gang riding around the Tatooine. And I'll always remember Ming-Na saying that George Lucas was very connected to mod culture. And things. It's like, well, wait a second now. I've never, ever heard George Lucas say anything about being a mod or the mod lifestyle or anything like that. George was a car junkie, but that's vastly different.
Right.
He was a grease monkey who got under the hood, and he loved auto racing. That's not mod culture. I got news for you. That's not mod culture. So whatever, so I always cringe when these contemporary actors and actresses quote George Lucas. When
George was a greaser, he was part of the whole cruising culture. That's not the mods. Yeah.
That's not the mods. So that's what's going on with Natasha Liu Bordizzo as far as Sabine connecting with the Force. But this is kind of interesting. She talks about the unique quality of Sabine being not only someone who is Force sensitive and has studied Jedi disciplines and fighting skills and all that, but she's also a trained Mandalorian. So you mash the two together, you get a very unique character with a very unique fighting style, and Natasha talks about it.
It was honestly very interesting to think about the samurai-esque kind of structure of the Jedi training in Ahsoka, and then the very Western cowboy Mandalorian kind of body language. And combining them was really fun. Ultimately, I think that as Sabine's on her journey to become a more skilled Jedi, there is still a messiness and a kind of roughness around her fights that I quite like right now, but I would want to work on and make them cleaner and more sleek as she does get more skilled. But I think it's so fun that where she's at in her journey right now as this apprentice who is coming back from a long hiatus and of hiding and mourning and sort of waiting, is that she is very messy, and she's sort of pulling the blaster out and then kind of taking a lot of rough hits, and there's a lot of just unpredictability to that. So I think the choreography kind of, again, reflects where she's at in her journey. And as she gets more disciplined, so would her form. As you can see, there's probably a big difference with Ahsoka's form in that she is so much more clean cut and disciplined and straight lined. So it's all worked into the story.
What she mentioned in the previous clip about there being criticism about perhaps Sabine took to the Force too easily or something like that. I was just thinking back. I feel like that criticism was levied at the character more when she was in animation than she was here with this in Ahsoka. I mean, Ahsoka has been all about struggle. I mean, she's literally standing there or sitting there grunting, trying to force levitate or force move objects and things like that. So I don't think it was so much that. I mean, we have had questions about her in the past about, my God, she can do anything. She can fix a ship. You know, she has incredible combat skills, and she can, go undercover and be undetectable. And she was an Imperial, and she was an Imperial pilot, and she's a Mandalorian, and now she's a Jedi. That has been tossed around as being, as my son would say, a little OP, a little overpowered. But in the way that Natasha's playing it, I don't think that she's coming across as being, Superwoman by any means. And I do like the fact that she's mentioning that she would like to see an evolution of her fighting skills so that you do see progression there. That's going to be I think that's going to be very, very important to this character. And hopefully it'll just make her a little more relatable than I think she ever was in animation. I did like the relationship between her and Ezra. I thought that was written really well. I want to see that developed in live action. But other than that, I didn't really relate to Sabine as a character very much in animation. I am in this series, though. In animation.
But more so in the live action. Yeah, I agree with you there. I do agree with you there. I mean, I oftentimes have trouble relating to any animated character. I almost need the live action connection, to see a living, breathing human being.
Are there certain animated characters, Jim, that the animatedness falls away for you and you just see them as the character?
That's a good question. I don't really think I have an answer for that off the top of my head. I mean,
the one that comes to my mind
to me, it's all just Star Wars at the end of the day. I try to maintain that kind of discipline. But when you talk about something as personal as connecting to a fictional character, I almost need the flesh and blood human being representing the character itself.
Yeah. Interesting. I think for me, the one where the live action and the animation have finally just blurred together is Anakin. I really, especially in light of Hayden's performance in Ahsoka, it really that little bit of screen time, and it wasn't a lot, that little bit of screen time melted the Hayden and the Matt Lanter version into one cohesive character for me, which is a good thing. And then Ahsoka, there was just something so well crafted with Ahsoka throughout the years, and the chemistry between her and Anakin and Obi-Wan and that trio of Matt and Ashley. I think that those characters, for me personally speaking, kind of transcended the art, the medium of animation.
Well, again, I think it's the real people fueling the character, the people who are actually true. Like, to me, Ahsoka might have been a flop if you didn't have Ashley Eckstein associated with that character. I mean, just Ashley's mere presence elevated Ahsoka. The way that Ashley connected with fans, the way she connects to the stories and the characters, and the way she goes about life being the living embodiment of the spirit of Ahsoka. That, I mean, you can't put a price tag on the value of something like that. It all comes back down to the human elements.
Boy, that's a really good
somebody
point.
like Hondo Onaka, for example, is, to me, he's solidly steeped in animation. He's a cartoon character.
I hadn't thought about
walks like
how
a cartoon
much
character.
The accessibility of those actors, not just for us having, covering it as a podcast, but all of the events that they did, especially in those early years. As you're saying this, I'm realizing, Jim, I think that is why. That is why I feel so connected to those characters, despite them being animated, is because I connected to the people behind them. And I hadn't thought of it until just now.
I think that Matt Lanter's take on Anakin Skywalker applied a ton of substance to the character that never existed prior to us seeing him in the Clone Wars. It took the entire character, the entire history of the character, and expanded upon it in such a profound way. You don't really get that from the animated version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. That character seems very consistent with what we see Ewan McGregor doing with the character in the prequels. But Anakin is a different character. He becomes more fleshed out through animation.
Yeah.
Which is like a crazy statement to make. But I think there's a lot of value added to the character of Anakin Skywalker as seen through animation, when you apply it to the big picture of the full story of Anakin from young slave boy on Tatooine to Darth Vader dying on the Death Star 2. I think that the animation just fuels a lot of what makes that character important, makes the character more important in the long run.
Agree. Well, always good to hear from Natasha and Daisy Ridley, and as these projects continue to heat up and as these actors go back to work, which they're doing now in new projects, we know that we'll have, even if they're unrelated projects, we'll always have guys like Jeff Horowitz asking the
sniffing around their Star Wars past at all time. Yeah, they'll be sniffing around asking the questions fans want to ask. So,
all right, well,
good job, Jeff.
Let's sniff around some pop culture. How about that?
All right.
Rebel Force Radio.
You've already made that Star Wars reference.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars parody.
This first one blew me away. I did not know this, and I thought that I knew everything about Star Wars, particularly when it comes to the might-have-beens, the could-have-beens, even the ones that were made up by that great SNL Kevin Spacey sketch, where it was the lost auditions for Star Wars, Walter Matthau, and Richard Dreyfuss, and people like that. This one really took me by surprise. Jodie Foster turned it down.
Yeah, she was actually offered the role. We know so much about the actors who almost were in Star Wars. We know so much about them because of the fact that audition tapes have been leaked online over the years. So you can see a Kurt Russell auditioning for the role of Han Solo, etc. I've never seen Jodie Foster auditioning for the role. I don't even know if she did audition for the role. She was very hot in Hollywood as a teenager in the 70s. She was a hot property back then. And it doesn't surprise me to hear that she was offered the role of Princess Leia. But that she actually was offered the role is a surprise. So here she is, Jodie Foster, on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. She's out there promoting this new HBO series of hers, True Detective Night Country. And she answers Jimmy's questions. I guess he was researching and discovered that she was actually offered the role of Princess Leia. Here's what she had to say.
You've been in so many iconic roles, and obviously we love what you do. But I saw this on the internet just resurfaced somehow that said that you were offered the role of Princess Leia in Star Wars. Is that
I
true?
was, yeah. And they were going for younger, Princess Leia. But I had a conflict. I was doing a Disney movie, and I just didn't want to pull out of the Disney movie because I was already under contract. So I didn't do it. And, they did an amazing job. I don't know how good I would have been. I might have had different hair. You probably
would have had, was that?
I might have gone with a pineapple.
What's really incredible about this for me is just how young Jodie Foster was in 1976. She was 14 years old to Carrie Fisher's 20.
In earlier drafts of Star Wars, the princess was significantly younger than what we see in the final version. Yeah, she was a teenager early on, and she had a couple of younger brothers, a couple of princes that she was traveling with, and they were trying to be hidden and everything. And Jedi like Luke Skywalker and Deke Starkiller were attempting to deliver her to safety with the two boys. And but the princess was significantly younger in those early drafts. Now, what if Jodie signed a contract? Then that would have locked George in a big way.
He wouldn't have been able to.
Locked in this.
Right.
The
whole
evolution
romance might have been thrown out the window.
Or the eventual evolution of Luke and Leia being brother and sister down the road in Return of the Jedi might have been impossible to pull off if Jodie Foster accepted the role, because George would have been locked into starting off with a 14-year-old Princess Leia. And he probably still would have hired a Mark Hamill in his early 20s.
Right.
So you back to Padme and Anakin kind of dynamic,
Now, Jodie Foster could have played it older. I mean, she did Taxi Driver. That came out in 76.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've got some photos up for the All Access members. I'm looking at photos of Jodie Foster at age 14, and she looks like she could play older. She looks like she could be about 16 or even 18 years old.
Yeah,
so
right. She does look mature for her age.
Yeah, but as she says in the interview, and as Jim's pointing out about the original, some of the original story points, they were looking for a younger actress. She even says that they were looking for younger. So there you go.
So that's Jodie Foster revealing something about the history of Star Wars that we really didn't know much about. She could have been Princess Leia with a pineapple hairdo. Would have been better than a baboon's ass. Right, Carrie?
Baboon ass.
Baboon ass.
So we got another tip here, Star Wars and pop culture. This comes from Joe from Rogersville, Missouri. And he says he caught a pop culture reference on the show Psych. Season 1, episode 9, Forget Me Not is the title of the episode. And about 15 minutes into it, one of the characters is talking to a mountain lion and is ignorant about whether he's quoting, well, you'll hear it. But, I mean, when I said he's talking to a mountain lion, I'm like, what the hell kind of show is Psych? I guess it makes sense in context, but just picture a guy standing, it appears to be like a laboratory or some sort of place where he's got a mountain lion in a cage.
Oh, all right.
He goes over and he starts talking to it.
Wow. Simba, I am your father.
I don't think Mufasa said that. Mufasa, Vader. I'm not Rappaport. It's all James Earl Jones. I'm not Rappaport. Was Ozzie Davis. It still works.
Maybe more of a James Earl Jones reference than a Star Wars reference, but it still works. We have one final one. This is one I just kind of discovered on my own. It's from Family Guy way back when in season 5.
Oh my gosh, a Star Wars reference in Family Guy? You don't say.
Well, this is one that I've never heard before. So it might be from season 5, but it's new to me. The episode is called Saving Private Brian. And it's a great Star Wars reference. You'll really enjoy this one.
Did you see Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, I saw part of it.
Why does Emperor Palpatine have a desk?
Huh?
In that scene where Yoda comes in and they're about to have that big fight, Emperor Palpatine clearly gets up from his desk. I mean, I'm just saying, what does he need a desk for?
Who the hell cares?
I'm just saying, it's weird. I mean, what was he doing at his desk? Like, right before Yoda walked in, what was he doing? Was he doing paperwork? Was he like, oh, Yoda, what do you need, and will it take longer than 5 minutes? I am absolutely swamped. These requisition forms for new TIE fighters have to be down to Debbie in accounting by 6, or Newt Gunray is going to pitch a tent in my waiting room.
New gun ray in this episode.
Dang, we've been waiting years for that.
And it was Family Guy that provided us with that moment. Classic.
You gotta love it.
Chewie, get us out of here!
All right, that's going to wrap things up for us here this week on Rebel Force Radio. Boy, I feel like we covered a lot of territory.
That's what we do.
Fun show. 2 hours goes by so fast. You know, there was a voicemail that I almost put on there, but it was like a little pulling back the curtain too much. Guy was saying, hey, there was an episode not long ago where Jimmy said, let's listen to another voicemail. And Swank goes, we're out of time. And Mac goes, okay. And there have been other times where I've heard Mac say to Swank, we're out of time. Who's keeping the clock? And what is the clock?
I have an answer for that. I'll give you a 2-word answer. Who's keeping the time? My bladder.
Well, yes, it does happen. It does happen. Nature does call, even when we're in the midst of recording the world's most listened to Star Wars podcast, Rebel Force Radio. As we talked about earlier, if you'd like to have more of it in your life, the best way to do that is through our Patreon. Go ahead and check it out at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio, or just click on the Patreon banner over on the right side of the Rebel Force Radio website. You'll get taken there where you can sign up to whatever membership level fits your budget and your needs and your wants. Weekly full show video. The podcast you're listening to right now, you can actually watch the video. Exclusive podcasts you can't get anywhere else. And I think the best community of Star Wars fans found anywhere in the galaxy. So check it out, rebelforceradio.com on Patreon. Also, our YouTube channel, please check it out. We've got... we release the audio of the podcast. We premiere it on YouTube, which is really fun. And if you happen to be there when other Rebel Force Radio listeners are hanging around, you can chat. You can join in on a discussion, listen to it in real time. I would say more times than not, I'm there, at least in the first few minutes, because I always just like to see how many people are listening. And I do like to hear some of the magic that Mac puts into the podcast. I know what we do, at least, here between the headphones live, but it's fun to also listen to. It's like a different experience listening to it. So please check that out on YouTube. Plus, so many archives of interviews from over the years and classic bits. A lot of times you'll hear us reference inside jokes, and you can usually find the genesis of that stuff over there on our YouTube channel. So check it out, subscribe, leave a comment. Speaking of YouTube, with Bad Batch Season 3, we will be broadcasting live, doing those after shows for Bad Batch. So that's another reason to go ahead and subscribe, because you'll get those notifications when we're going live. You can follow us on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and X. The website for all things and everything Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. You want to help us out? You want to spread the word? Best thing you can do is do what you're doing right now, and that is listening to Rebel Force Radio, telling friends about it. It's a very organic... This show grows in very organic ways. We don't advertise. We don't have big marketing budgets. The way that we grow is by you telling your friends, your family members, Star Wars fans in your life that you're listening to Rebel Force Radio and you think they should too. So please do keep listening. Subscribe if you can, if you're still getting us on a podcatcher. Love to have your subscriptions, but also love to have your reviews. We read them all. We just have one very simple rule, please.
Make them good.
That'll wrap it up for this week. We'll see you next time here on Rebel Force Radio. But until then, for RFR, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
Baboon ass.